The Galactic Council sat in a vast chamber that echoed with the hum of distant stars as its members deliberated over matters that spanned the galaxy's vast expanse, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of holoscreens displaying the latest intelligence reports from across the stars, when suddenly a low buzz interrupted the flow of conversation. At first, it was barely noticeable, but it grew louder until it became impossible to ignore. The holoscreens shifted, flickering to life, with a new report that seemed impossible to believe. It was a video transmission from Xalath 9, a lush and dangerous planet located on the outer rim of the galaxy, and the video showed something that caused the entire council to freeze in place. The feed showed a woman standing before an apex predator of unimaginable ferocity, the T-Rex. The T-Rex was a creature of legend and fear, its enormous body covered in thick scales, its fangs the size of swords capable of tearing through metal with ease. The council had heard rumors about the creature and studied it from afar, but no one had ever dared to challenge it, let alone interact with it in such a calm manner. Yet there she was, Captain Elena Marks, a human of all species, standing face to face with the terrifying beast and doing the unthinkable. The video showed Elena reaching out with a steady hand toward the T-Rex. It was a moment that seemed to stretch in time as the colossal creature loomed over her, its eyes locked onto hers, its massive jaws poised to strike at any moment. Yet, instead of attacking, the T-Rex did something no one in the galaxy had ever witnessed before. It lowered its head to her and allowed her to touch it. The council members exchanged confused glances. The video continued, showing Elena gently stroking the T-Rex's scales, as if they were old companions. The footage was undeniable. There was no trickery, no hidden devices or weapons in play. The T-Rex stood there, relaxed under the human's touch, as if it were just another pet animal, the kind one might keep for companionship. The council was in shock. They had seen countless species across the galaxy engage with dangerous creatures, but this was something entirely different. Humans had always been considered a young and unpredictable species, and while they were known for their adaptability, no one had ever thought they could connect with a predator like this. The T-Rex was considered the top of the food chain on Xalath 9. Its fearsome reputation had kept every other species at bay, and now this human had not only survived an encounter but was petting it. Whispers began to spread through the chamber as some council members started to question the validity of the report. They insisted this was some sort of mistake, some kind of clever illusion, while others struggled to comprehend what they were seeing. How could a human connect with such a creature? What kind of strategy was this? And what did it mean for the galaxy's balance of power? And then the council turned to the woman responsible for this incredible sight, the one who had somehow managed to tame a beast feared by all. They demanded an explanation. Captain Elena Marks was summoned to the council chambers, her face calm and her posture confident. She was about to answer the most important question of her life. How had she done the impossible? How had she become the first human to touch the apex predator and walk away without a scratch? The vast chamber was silent as Captain Elena Marks stepped forward to address the Galactic Council. Her boots echoed against the smooth floors as she made her way to the center of the room. The council members watched her with a mix of awe and suspicion. She was a human, a species so young in the grand scope of the galaxy, and yet here she was, standing unshaken in front of the most powerful beings in the universe, after having done something that no one had ever thought possible. Elena's expression was calm, almost serene, as she gazed at the alien faces that stared down at her. She knew the importance of this moment. She had known it from the second the transmission had been received. The galaxy had been watching, waiting for an explanation, and now, here she was, poised to give it. A soft hum filled the air as the council president, a tall, blue-skinned being with multiple eyes and tentacles, spoke, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of urgency. Captain Marks, we've seen the footage. The T-Rex, a creature feared by every species that has encountered it, and yet you stand here before us, claiming to have tamed it. Explain this to us. How is it possible that a human, a species that has barely touched the stars, could do what even the most powerful of our warriors would not dare? Elena nodded slowly, her gaze unwavering. She had expected the question, and she had spent days preparing for it. She glanced at the holo screens around her, the footage still playing in the background, showing her interacting with the T-Rex. "I didn't tame it. Not in the way you're thinking," she began. Her voice was clear, each word measured as she explained her perspective. The council leaned forward, the alien's eyes glowing with curiosity. Elena continued, "The T-Rex is not some mindless killing machine as you all have been led to believe. I spent weeks on Salath 9, observing it from a distance. What you saw in the video wasn't taming. It was understanding." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. The T-Rex is a creature shaped by its environment. It's territorial, yes, and it will kill to protect what it sees as its domain. But that doesn't mean it's incapable of other things. One of the council members, a being with long, slender arms and shimmering skin, spoke up, her voice sharp. "So, you claim the T-Rex has emotions, that it can be reasoned with? No predator in the galaxy is capable of such things. Not on this scale." Elena's eyes met the alien's, her confidence unwavering. "It's not about reasoning with it in the way you think. It's about understanding its instincts. The T-Rex, like any species, acts out of fear, out of a need to survive. But if you show it patience, respect, and give it space to breathe, it responds. It's not about domination. It's about communication." She allowed the council members to absorb her words. There was a long pause, the only sound being the subtle hum of the chamber's lights. The council members exchanged glances, some with furrowed brows, others clearly skeptical, but Elena could see a few beginning to consider her point of view. She continued, "I didn't force the T-Rex to do anything. What you saw in the video is a creature allowing itself to trust me. I learned its body language, the subtle signs that it wasn't a threat. I knew when it wanted me to back off, and when it was open to calm interaction." The president of the council leaned forward slightly. "And yet the T-Rex has killed countless explorers and invaders. Are you suggesting that it is merely misunderstood?" Elena nodded, her voice firm. "Yes, misunderstood. The T-Rex is not the enemy here. The real enemy is the way we all view creatures like it, with fear and suspicion, rather than attempting to understand them." Her words hung in the air, challenging the very foundation of how the galaxy viewed strength, power, and the untamed creatures that lived on the fringes of known space. For the first time, Elena could see cracks in the council's resolve. She was beginning to get through, to open their minds to something they had never considered. But there was still much to be said. The council wasn't convinced yet, not by a long shot. The questions would keep coming, and Elena was ready. She had something they needed to hear. And perhaps, just perhaps, her presence here, standing before the most powerful beings in the galaxy, could change everything. The council chamber fell into a deep silence as Elena's words settled into the minds of the gathered beings. It was a silence filled with skepticism, curiosity, and doubt. Some of the members exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable, while others leaned forward, visibly intrigued. But no one spoke immediately, as if they were trying to process what they had just heard. The president of the council, a tall, multi-eyed alien with gleaming silver skin, broke the silence with a voice that was both measured and commanding. "Your claim is extraordinary, Captain Marks. But extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. We cannot simply accept your testimony alone. The T-Rex is a creature that has killed many across the stars. Its aggression is legendary, and it does not simply allow itself to be touched. This must be investigated thoroughly." Elena's gaze remained steady. She had expected this. Of course, the council wasn't going to take her word at face value. She knew that this would require more than just words. It would require action. And she was ready. "We will send a team to Salath 9, the president continued. "You will accompany them. This investigation will confirm the validity of your claims. The council has already assembled an expert team of xenobiologists, military tacticians, and peacekeepers. If the T-Rex truly responds to you in the way you describe, we will know within a matter of days. But if this is some form of manipulation, or worse, a trap, we will not hesitate to act." Alina nodded without hesitation. She knew the stakes. This was more than just a test of her ability to communicate with an alien species. It was a test of humanity itself. She had to prove that the connection she had formed with the Tyrex was real, that it wasn't a fluke, and that humans had the potential to build bridges where others had only seen walls. As she was escorted out of the chamber, the hum of the council's deliberations continued behind her. She couldn't hear the conversations, but she could feel their weight. The council had made it clear that this was not merely an investigation, it was a trial, and it would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Alina worked with the council's team of experts to gather everything they would need for the mission. The team was diverse. Alien researchers with advanced knowledge of predator species, military officers with experience in combat with dangerous creatures, and peacekeepers who specialized in interspecies diplomacy. All of them were eager to see if Alina's claims held any truth, but there were also those who looked at her with barely concealed skepticism, as if her success with the Tyrex had somehow threatened their worldview. When the mission finally launched, Alina stood at the helm of a heavily armed vessel, surrounded by the Council's team. The ship made its way toward Salath-9, a dark green orb that loomed ahead, covered in thick jungles and towering mountains. The planet's atmosphere was dense, and the creature they were after was one of the most elusive and dangerous in the galaxy. There was no room for error. Upon landing, Alina led the team into the heart of the jungle, where the Tyrex was known to roam. The dense foliage seemed to close in on them as they moved deeper into the wild, and Alina couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. The eyes of the galaxy were on her. This was it, the test. Hours passed without a sign of the creature. The team moved cautiously, scanning the environment for any indication of the Tyrex's presence. But it wasn't until they reached a clearing that Alina felt the first stirring of recognition. The air shifted, the tension in the atmosphere thickening as the Tyrex appeared from the shadows. It was massive, larger than she remembered, and its eyes locked onto hers with a piercing gaze. The moment stretched out, the creature's gaze heavy with both curiosity and wariness. Alina's heart raced, but she remained still, her body language relaxed. She had done this 100 times before. She had to show the Tyrex that she meant no harm. The council team held their breath, watching every movement, every twitch of the creature's body. Would it attack? Would it retreat? Alina extended her hand slowly, speaking in the low, calming tone she had used so many times before. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice steady. "I'm here." The Tyrex didn't move. It studied her, its massive form still as a statue, but its eyes softened. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, it lowered its head, allowing Alina to approach. The council's team gasped in unison, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Alina's calmness in the face of such a monstrous being was nothing short of extraordinary. The clearing on Salath-9 was thick with tension, the air heavy with the expectation of the council's team. Alina stood motionless, her gaze locked onto the Tyrex. It was as if the entire jungle around them held its breath. The massive predator, which had been responsible for so many deaths in the past, stood before them, silent, unmoving, its piercing eyes never leaving Alina's face. The council team was still, their eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and wonder, unsure of what they were witnessing. Alina could feel the weight of their stares, the questions pressing down on her like a tangible force. Every movement, every word had to be perfect. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment that could prove whether the connection she'd formed with the Tyrex was real or just a fluke. If she succeeded, humanity's place in the galaxy would be forever altered. If she failed, there was no telling what consequences could arise. The Tyrex's massive body was tense, its tail twitching slightly, the muscles rippling beneath its scales. But Alina didn't back away. Instead, she extended her hand slowly, fingers spread just enough to show the T-Rex she wasn't a threat. The rest of the team watched with bated breath, waiting for the moment when the creature would either charge or retreat. Every eye was on the T-Rex, but Elena knew the real test was in the creature's reaction to her. "You can do this," Elena whispered to herself. She had to trust the bond they shared. The T-Rex had never been violent with her, not after the first tense moments of their initial encounter. She had learned to read its body language, its subtle signs of emotion. And she knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that this was no ordinary predator. The T-Rex's nostrils flared as it took in Elena's scent, and for a moment, it seemed like the entire world paused. Then, without warning, the massive creature took a single step forward. The ground trembled under its weight, the sound of its claws scraping against the stone floor of the clearing echoing through the jungle. The team instinctively tensed, ready to intervene if needed, but Elena held up her hand, signaling them to remain still. She could handle this. The T-Rex's massive head dipped slightly, its sharp gaze never leaving hers. Elena took another step closer, her heartbeat steady despite the gravity of the moment. The air was thick with a strange energy, a connection she had never felt before with any creature. She could see it now. The T-Rex wasn't reacting out of aggression. It wasn't testing her strength or dominance. It was curious. The creature's body language had softened, and she could feel its apprehension starting to melt away. Her hand, still extended, came closer to the creature's head. Slowly, cautiously, Elena brushed her fingers against the rough scales that covered its face. A low growl rumbled in the creature's chest, not one of warning, but something else entirely, contentment, even. It was an unspoken communication, a sound that conveyed more than words could. The council members stood frozen, their expressions a mixture of awe and disbelief. Some had been skeptical, but now, as they witnessed the T-Rex responding to Elena's touch, their doubts began to waver. It wasn't just a fluke. It wasn't some coincidence that the T-Rex had lowered its head to her. There was something deeper, something extraordinary about the bond between them. For a long moment, Elena stood there, her hand resting gently on the T-Rex's scales. The creature didn't move, didn't pull away. Instead, it leaned into her touch, almost as if it was seeking comfort, not just from her, but from the connection they shared. Elena could feel the heat of its body beneath her fingertips, the pulse of life that resonated through her palm. It was a moment of mutual understanding, one that bridged the vast gap between predator and prey. Elena slowly withdrew her hand and turned to face the council team, who were now staring at her with wide eyes, their earlier skepticism shattered. She met their gaze, her expression calm but knowing. "This isn't about control," she said quietly. "It's about trust, respect, understanding. The T-Rex isn't a monster, and it never was." The council's silence spoke volumes. They had witnessed something extraordinary, something they couldn't easily explain away. Some of the members looked at each other with new respect, while others still held on to their doubts. But one thing was certain. Elena had just done something that no one thought possible. The T-Rex, once the most feared creature in the galaxy, had allowed her to approach it. It had trusted her, and that trust had changed everything. As the team began to process what they had just witnessed, Elena turned her attention back to the T-Rex, who was now standing calmly in front of her. It was clear now. This wasn't the end of her mission. It was only the beginning. She had shown them that humanity's potential was far greater than they could have ever imagined. The galaxy was about to change, and humans would play a pivotal role in that transformation. But there was still more to prove, more to understand. Elena knew that her journey with the T-Rex wasn't over. It had only just begun. The atmosphere in the clearing was thick with anticipation, and the air seemed to vibrate with the power of the moment. Elena's hand had just pulled away from the T-Rex, but its massive form remained unnervingly still. The council members were silent, their eyes locked on her, their earlier disbelief replaced by awe. Elena's calm demeanor had done the impossible. She had not only survived an encounter with the T-Rex, but she had proven that it was not just a beast to be feared. It was a creature to be understood. But as the seconds stretched on, Elena knew that the real test was not in the T-Rex's reaction, but in what came next. This wasn't just about gaining the trust of a single creature. It was about changing the perceptions of an entire galaxy. She could sense that the Council's next move would be critical. The team members around her were still in a state of shock, processing what they had witnessed. Some of them were already whispering to each other, their voices a low murmur that carried a tone of respect, while others, especially those from the military, looked uneasy, as if unsure how to reconcile their old beliefs with what they had just seen. Elena, the voice of the Council President, broke the silence, his multi-eyed face betraying nothing but curiosity. This changes everything. Elena turned her attention to him, her gaze steady. "It's only the beginning," she said quietly. "We've only just scratched the surface of what's possible." The president nodded slowly, his tentacles twitching as he processed her words. "You've shown us that the T-Rex is not the mindless killer we believed it to be. But the question now is, can you extend this understanding to others?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, as if he was testing her resolve. "What if we could replicate this kind of communication with other species, other apex predators? Would humanity be able to bridge the gap between the known and the unknown? Would you be willing to take on such a responsibility?" Elena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the question settle on her shoulders. She had spent her life exploring the boundaries of human potential, but this was something entirely new. The thought of extending her bond with the T-Rex to other dangerous species across the galaxy was daunting, even overwhelming. But the possibility, the responsibility, was a challenge she could not turn down. "I would," she said, her voice unwavering. "Humans have the ability to adapt, to understand. If we can show the galaxy that there is more to us than war and fear, then we have a chance to change everything. I've seen it with the T-Rex. It's possible. It just requires patience and an open mind." The president's expression shifted, his numerous eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Very well. We will give you the resources and support to continue this research. But you must know, this path will not be easy. Many will resist. The galaxy is filled with species that thrive on fear, who use violence as their first and only solution. You will face opposition from those who would rather maintain the status quo." Elena nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I know. But this is bigger than any one species, any one battle. If humanity can show the galaxy that there is another way, a way of understanding and coexistence, then perhaps we can rewrite the future." The council members exchanged glances, and Elena could see that their perspectives were starting to shift. The seeds of change had been planted, but whether or not they would take root was another question entirely. Still, there was something undeniable in the air now, something that hadn't been there before. The galaxy was watching, and the future of interspecies relations was hanging in the balance. As Elena turned her attention back to the T-Rex, she couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. The creature stood still, its eyes fixed on her with an almost knowing look. She had proven that a human could connect with an apex predator, but now she had to prove that humanity could connect with the galaxy. She had to show that understanding was not just a concept, but a tangible force that could change the course of history. The team began to gather their equipment, preparing for the next steps in their investigation. Elena's mind raced with possibilities. The T-Rex was only the beginning. There were countless other creatures, planets, and species out there, each with its own mysteries, its own challenges, and its own potential for connection. And it wasn't just about the creatures of the galaxy. Elena knew that if humanity could break down the barriers that separated species, it could also begin to heal the divisions that ran deep within its own ranks. Perhaps the T-Rex was a metaphor for something larger, something that humanity itself could embrace. The galaxy was filled with potential for both destruction and peace, but only those brave enough to see beyond the surface would ever unlock its true power. As Elena and the Council's team boarded their ship to return to the galactic capital, Elena looked out the window, her gaze fixed on the distant stars. The galaxy was vast, and humanity was still young. But perhaps, just perhaps, they had the power to change the very fabric of the universe. The journey ahead would not be easy, but Alina was ready for it. Alina stared out the observation window of the ship as it soared through the black expanse of space. The stars streaked past in a blur of light, but her mind was elsewhere. The journey back to the galactic capital felt different now, heavy, laden with the weight of what she had accomplished and the unknown challenges ahead. Despite the success on Salath 9, despite the evidence that humans could indeed connect with creatures like the Tyrex, Alina knew there were forces at work that didn't want this kind of change. There were factions in the galaxy who thrived on the old ways, the ways of fear, of dominance. She could already feel the pushback starting to form. The Council had agreed to continue her research, but the promises of support were fragile. The galaxy was not a place of peace and unity, no matter how much some hoped it would be. As Alina turned her thoughts over in her mind, she couldn't ignore the underlying truth. Resistance was inevitable. As if on cue, the door to the command deck slid open, and one of the Council's top military advisors, General Kortha, entered. His large frame filled the doorway, his armor glinting in the low light. His species, the Krotha, were known for their physical strength and their no-nonsense approach to war. Kortha was as imposing as they came, but his gaze was intense, thoughtful, and full of doubt. "Captain Marks." He greeted her with a terse nod. "We need to talk." Alina turned from the window to face him, her posture relaxed but ready. "What's on your mind, General?" Kortha's eyes narrowed, and he crossed the room to stand beside her, staring out the window. "I don't need to tell you that there are factions within the Council that will not take kindly to your unconventional approach." His voice was low, his words deliberate. "There are those who believe your success with the Tyrex was nothing more than a fluke, and that your methods are too risky. You're making enemies, Captain. Powerful ones." Alina took a deep breath, her fingers tapping lightly against the console. "I know, but it's not about me. It's about the future. The Tyrex isn't just a rare case. There are countless other creatures out there that we could connect with, that we could learn from. If we can understand them, work with them, we can build alliances, even with those who have always been seen as enemies." Kortha grunted. "You don't get it, do you? This galaxy is built on power. Respect is earned through strength, not kindness. The Tyrex may have responded to you, but that doesn't mean the rest of the galaxy will follow. Some species will see your actions as weakness, others as a threat to their control." Alina's expression hardened. Then it's time to change how they view strength. Strength isn't just in weapons and violence, Kortha. It's in understanding. It's in unity. Kortha snorted. "Easy to say when you're not the one who has to fight to maintain control of a planet, or defend your people from predators that don't care about your understanding." She held his gaze steadily. "I know that the galaxy has always relied on fear and violence to resolve conflicts, but I believe there's another way. That's what this mission is about. It's about proving that humanity can offer something new, something better." Kortha was silent for a moment. Then he shook his head. "I can't say I agree with you, Captain. But I've seen what you did with the Tyrex. And I'll be honest, I didn't think it was possible. So maybe there is something to your way. But I'm warning you, there will be a cost. There always is." Alina turned back to the window, her gaze returning to the endless void of space. "I'm prepared to pay it," she said quietly. "If we can make the galaxy understand that there is more to power than just dominance, then it will be worth it." Kortha didn't respond right away. He watched her for a moment, his eyes filled with uncertainty, before finally turning and heading for the door. "You're walking a dangerous path, Captain. Be careful. The galaxy doesn't change easily." As the door closed behind him, Alina exhaled deeply, her fingers gripping the edge of the console. She knew he was right. The path ahead would be fraught with danger and opposition. The old powers wouldn't relinquish their control without a fight, and the galaxy wasn't ready for the kind of change she was proposing. But that only made her more determined. Humanity had the potential to lead the galaxy into a new age, an age of understanding, of unity, and of respect for all life. But that kind of revolution would take time, effort, and most of all, courage. Belina had already risked everything to form a bond with the Tyrex. Now it was time to risk even more, to fight not with weapons, but with the very idea that the galaxy could be better than it had ever been before. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime from the communications console. A message had come in, one from the highest levels of the council. She didn't need to see the contents of the message to know what it was. She had known it would come sooner or later. The council's decision was clear. It was time for her to take the next step. But with it, she would be walking into the heart of the resistance. The hum of the ship's engines was a constant backdrop to Alina's thoughts as she stood in the council chambers. The tension in the room was palpable. Several high-ranking officials, including some of the most influential leaders in the galaxy, were gathered in a circle. The council had summoned her for an urgent meeting. Alina knew what this was about. The political resistance had grown stronger, and they had come to make their position clear. Across the room, Councillor Eleth, a member of the ruthless Akoran species, stood with his arms folded, his expression unreadable. The Akoran were known for their strength and cunning, and their military empire had built much of its power on the premise that species could only survive by crushing their enemies. Belina had never trusted Eleth, and from the way he eyed her now, she could tell that distrust was mutual. "Alina Marks," Eleth began, his voice smooth but cutting. "You have proven your point with the Tyrex. The creature is not the mindless beast we once thought it to be, but that does not mean it changes everything. It does not change the balance of power in the galaxy. You're asking us to gamble with that balance, to trust in something that has no evidence of working beyond the rare case you've encountered." Belina met his gaze without flinching. "I'm not asking for blind trust. I'm asking for the chance to prove that we can build something better. Fear has ruled this galaxy for too long, Counselor. If we continue down that path, we will only breed more violence, more enemies." Eleth's lips curled into a thin smile, but there was no warmth in it. "Violence is the language of the galaxy, Captain. You forget that your enemies won't listen to your ideals. They will only understand strength. And right now, you're the one who is weakest. You have no allies, no support, and no foundation to build upon." Before Alina could respond, the door to the chamber opened with a hiss. A figure stepped inside. A tall, regal being with luminous blue skin and a crown of golden light hovering above their head. It was Ambassador Zivara, a representative of the enigmatic Cyril, a species known for their advanced intellect and pacifist philosophy. They had been one of the few who had openly supported Alina's vision from the start. Zivara's presence in the room immediately shifted the atmosphere. The Cyril were not often involved in galactic politics, but when they spoke, their words carried weight. As Zivara walked toward the center of the room, their voice rang out, clear and confident. "You speak of strength, Eleth, but what you fail to see is that true strength lies in the ability to adapt, to find new ways of solving old problems. We Cyril have seen what happens when a species relies solely on power. It brings stagnation, destruction, and the inevitable downfall of civilizations. The future, Captain Marks, is not in war, but in understanding." The contrast between Eleth's sharp, aggressive posture and Zivara's calm, unshakable presence was striking. As Zivara continued, Alina could see the shift in the room. Some of the council members, who had been quietly observing, now leaned forward. The weight of Zivara's words had an undeniable effect. "We support you, Captain Marks," Zivara said, turning toward Alina. "The Tyrex is only the beginning. What you've done has opened a new frontier, one that holds great potential for all of us. If humanity can truly break the cycle of violence, if you can show the galaxy that a different way is possible, We are willing to back you. But know this, you cannot do this alone. Alina's heart skipped a beat. The Cyril's support was invaluable, but it wasn't enough on its own. This was only one faction of the galaxy, and there were countless others, many of whom would never share the Cyril's vision. But it was a start, and in the current climate, it was more than she had hoped for. Eleth's expression darkened as Zavara spoke. "You are making a grave mistake, Ambassador," he sneered. "This is not a matter of philosophy or ideals. It is about survival. The galaxy does not change by simply talking. The Cyril may be content to sit on their high thrones of knowledge, but others will strike, and when they do, Captain Marks and her supporters will be the first to fall." Zavara's gaze hardened, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "We will see, Eleth. We will see who is truly ready for the future." As the conversation began to heat up, Alina's thoughts raced. The battle ahead was not just against the old ways of the galaxy, but against the fear and prejudice that had been ingrained in so many species for millennia. She had allies now, real allies, but she knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. The galaxy was not ready for the change she envisioned, but Alina would not back down. She had already seen what was possible with the Tyrex, and she knew that if she could make the galaxy see that, everything could be different. Her thoughts were interrupted as the meeting began to break up. The council members dispersed, some more open to the idea of change, while others, like Eleth, remained resolutely opposed. But as Alina stepped out into the hall with Zavara by her side, she couldn't shake the feeling that the tides were slowly, but surely, beginning to turn. The war room was dim, filled with a heavy silence, as Alina sat at the head of the table. Maps of the galaxy were projected in front of her, countless planets and systems, marked with varying degrees of instability. Some were peaceful, like the Cyril's homeworld, while others were on the brink of chaos, their governments teetering between factions that sought domination. Every marker on the map represented a challenge, an opportunity, or an obstacle. Alina's mind raced. After the council meeting, she had taken stock of what she had gained and what she had lost. The Cyril's support was invaluable, but Eleth's resistance remained a formidable force. More than ever, it seemed that the future of the galaxy hinged on the delicate balance between these two opposing factions. Zavara's voice broke her concentration. "You understand that our people, while fully behind you, are hesitant to take more direct action until we see how your methods play out. The galaxy is fractured, and the seeds of war are still sown in its heart." "I understand," Alina replied, her voice steady, though her thoughts were turbulent. "But we can't afford to wait forever. Every day that passes is another day the old ways of fear and violence continue to shape the galaxy." Zavara nodded solemnly. "Indeed, the galaxy is caught in a cycle, one that has existed for millennia. We are not naive enough to think that it can be broken without cost. But the question is, will humanity be able to carry the weight of that cost?" Alina stood and moved toward the large window, gazing out into the blackness of space. Her reflection stared back at her, pale against the backdrop of stars. She thought about the Tyrex, about the breakthroughs she had achieved, but she also thought about the war-torn worlds, the suffering, and the long-held divisions. She knew that the path she had chosen was not an easy one, but it was the only one worth taking. "I think it's time we show the galaxy the true strength of humanity," Alina said, her voice calm but firm. "It's time to take a stand." Zavara raised an eyebrow. "What do you propose?" Alina turned to face them, her eyes filled with determination. "I want to initiate a diplomatic mission, something unprecedented. I want to bring together a coalition of species, those who believe in change, those who are open to new ideas. If we can show the galaxy that cooperation is possible, that we can work together for the greater good, we may stand a chance against the forces that want to maintain the status quo." Zavara looked thoughtful for a moment, then nodded. "It's a bold plan, but the galaxy is not easily moved, Captain. Some will see it as a threat, others as a fragile hope. Elena smiled slightly. All the more reason to make it happen. If we don't try now, then we will never know what could be possible. As Zivera left the room to gather support from their allies, Elena sat down again, her fingers tracing the map projected before her. The task was immense. The opposition would not relent easily, yet she knew that the galaxy had reached a tipping point. The old systems of control were collapsing, and the time for change was now. Whether the galaxy was ready or not, she would move forward with her mission. Days turned into weeks as Elena and her team prepared for the diplomatic mission. Messages were sent to leaders across the galaxy, including representatives from systems previously untouched by the idea of peace and cooperation. Elena's vision had begun to spread, albeit slowly, and soon, the first interspecies summit was scheduled to take place. But as the days passed, Elena could feel the pressure mounting. The opposition, led by Aleth and his allies, was growing more vocal. Rumors spread that certain factions were beginning to mobilize their fleets, preparing for conflict. They viewed Elena's vision not as a future, but as a threat to their power. She knew that time was running out. As the summit loomed closer, Elena received a report that sent a chill down her spine. A large fleet had been spotted near the capital. Aleth and his supporters were making their move. It was happening. War was on the horizon. But Elena had no intention of backing down. She had already shown that humanity could connect with the Tyrex. Perhaps now, it was time to show that humanity could also stand firm, united in the face of war, united in the belief that a new path could be forged. The council chamber would soon be the stage for the final confrontation, and Elena knew that no matter what happened, she had already won a victory. The galaxy was no longer a place of darkness and isolation. It was a place of possibility. The dawn of a new era was approaching, and humanity would lead the way.